dungeon.
Welcome to Cauldron's Crypt. I'm your host, Master Cauldron. If you're new to the show, I use my 24 years of BDSM experience and 20 years working in the psychology field to dispel myths, get rid of stereotypes, and answer your questions about BDSM. You can call in at 865-268-4005 to leave your questions, or visit the crypt at cauldronscrypt.com. On this episode of the Crypt, we're going to hit those rules to love by, and I have an interview that is not from DomCon. I spoke with Susan Wright from the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom about FOSTA SESTA or SESTA FOSTA and what the NCSF is doing to fight that and what they're doing for all of us that you probably are not aware of. So let's hit those rules to love by and jump into the interview. Rule number 1, safe, sane, consensual, and informed. Rule number 2, kinky. That's KNKI and comes from the Kink app available on all platforms, but not a sponsor. It stands for knowledge, no intolerance, kindness, and integrity. And rule number 3, the quote from Mr. Paul Young, submission is not about authority and it's not about obedience. It is all about relationships of love and respect. Good afternoon, Susan.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, I am well. And yourself?
I'm doing really good.
Yeah. Awesome. So the NCSF, this is a 101 podcast. We've got about 10,000 listeners at this point a month, for them being mostly beginners. What is the NCSF?
The National Coalition for Sexual Freedom is the advocacy group for the alt-sex communities. And so we are the interface. We reach out to professionals, law enforcement, the judicial system. We try to make sure that laws and mainstream society don't impact negatively on us and interfere with our ability to be able to hold these 101 workshops and these big events. We also talk to the media. So we're kind of the interface between the communities and mainstream society.
Now, how long has this organization been around?
We started in 1997, so we've been doing this for 22 years, and we are completely grassroots. We have 84 coalition partner groups, and so we are responsive to these BDSM, swing, and polyamory groups. They tell us what's happening and what we need to work on. We also have about 60 supporting members, which are groups, businesses, and some individuals. So we really have many thousands of people that are kind of telling us what to do and keeping us on track.
Accountability partners, always a good thing.
Yes.
So I know part of the work that you've done that I'm very interested in. I spent 20 years working in mental health. I've been living the BDSM lifestyle for about 24 years. As a practitioner and someone working in mental health, it's always bothered me that there was a guidebook that diagnosed us as all just blanket case mentally ill. Now, what has the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom and you personally done to help change this?
Well, this is the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. We call that the DSM. And the DSM sets out the diagnostic criteria for all mental disorders. So this project actually started within the BDSM community way back in 1987 when Ray Spannon and Guy Baldwin decided to try to get the APA's DSM version 3 changed because it called us sexual deviants. And so they wanted to try to, it started the first step in changing this. I was involved in 1994, back even before NCSF was started, in a second part with the DSM-4. And what happened was they decided to revise it again in 2008. And at that point, NCSF let everybody know we're going to be involved in changing this because primarily one of the big problems that we were seeing was that therapists who were educated knew enough to go, okay, well, as long as it's consenting adults, it's okay. But everybody else would look at the DSM, including lawyers. They'd open it up in family court when there was a child custody hearing and say, see, it says here, if you have a paraphilia, you could have another one, which means you're a pedophile, which means we're taking your kids away. So in 2008, we had 124 parents come to NCSF for help saying that because they were kinky, their kids were being taken away either temporarily or threatened to be taken away, and they were having to try to fight this. So we started the project again in 2008, and we had a petition with 3,000 signatures. We worked closely with the APA paraphilia subwork group to let them know what was happening. And they put out the first revision, the proposed revisions in 2010. Which kind of separated the paraphilias, which is just unusual sexual interest, from paraphilic disorders. And they kind of like took feedback on it and was finally published in 2013. And this has had a huge impact on our community. Last year, we had 14 parents come to us for help who were kinky. So
wow.
It's been a big impact. And, it really was, they were kind of, the paraphilia subwork group was kind of shocked that this was happening. They're like, but you're just kinky. And we were like, yes, but you've got this list of things that goes from spanking all the way to, like serial killing. Like, what do you think people are going to think? You're the ones that are saying this stuff. You need to fix it. And so they really did fix it, much to their credit.
Wow. So as a personal advocate for this and this change, and what steps have you had to take? I'm sure there's a lot of meetings. Is this going to Washington? Is this going to conventions and talking about this? How did you make these changes or help to make these changes come about?
Yes, it's doing a lot of educational outreach to professionals. NCSF, a large part of our budget goes to sending us to these conferences to exhibit and to give workshops. For example, we're going to go to the American Psychological Association's conference in Chicago in August. And there's, 20,000 therapists there, and there's in a giant exhibition hall, and NCSF is the only exhibit there that's talking about adult consensual sexuality. And by the end of last year's conference, we had all these therapists coming up to us. I mean, there was 3 of us there, and we were all talking to different people with a line formed because there was just such a desperate need for this information. So we also, when we were doing the DSM, we actually went to ASECT, the American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, and gave a workshop about revising the paraphilias and made some suggestions that, influential professionals, they started talking, they know each other in this field. So that had a big impact. We also did, a petition that professionals as well as people from our community signed. We did surveys. In our violence and discrimination survey in 2008, we actually had a section called In Their Own Words, where people could write about the discrimination that they were experiencing. And the largest section was discrimination from therapists who were confused about, well, if somebody's kinky and they can't stop being kinky or they're participating in community groups, does that mean that they have a mental illness? So we did a lot of that, but really we had the breakthrough when I did everything I could to reach out to these individual members of the paraphilia subwork group. And a friend of mine, Barbara Nicky, told me that one of them, he's a psychiatrist, Dr. Richard Kruger, who focuses on sadism, sexual sadism, was going to be at New York City's Philosophy Center. And they were talking about why people practice BDSM. So I went there and actually made contact with him personally and realized that he was one of the loudest voices at that meeting saying, oh, kinky people, this is fine. As long as it's consensual and, everybody understands what's happening. And I was like, hallelujah. So I went up afterwards and started talking to him. And that really kind of was the breakthrough, was making that personal contact.
It's my understanding now that as it's written for the DSM-5, basically, as long as it doesn't interfere with activities of daily living, paraphrasing here, of course, it's non-diagnosable. And again, I know that's a great simplification, but how could we state that even better?
That's actually a good way to put it. The problem sometimes comes when societal stigma can impact your daily life. For example, if you've gotten fired because you're outed to be kinky or outed yourself as being kinky. Or what about those parents that were still having child custody issues? We still had parents that come to us that have issues. So what we're hoping is we would love to see the consensual paraphilias removed entirely. So it's not even an issue. That way it would be seen as if you're doing this non-consensually, if you have a repeated pattern of doing this, go into more the very rare sort of sexual sadism, paraphilic disorders, get masochism out of there completely, unless you're doing self-harm in a way that's beyond even what BDSM does. I mean, like, it's not like we sit and we sterilize the area. You know what I mean? If we're going to do temporary piercing and things like that. It's a much more thoughtful, a lot of care goes into it. So if somebody's doing this without that kind of care, that could be seen as maybe problematic. So if we could remove the consensual paraphilias, that's sort of the next step. We'll probably make a call for that when the next change comes, is announced that they're going to be revising it again. We also, as our communities, have to be very concerned about hypersexuality being introduced. This is kind of the gateway to sex addiction. And unfortunately, in their like checklists, a lot of the things that they have kind of pertain to who we are, which is, we spend a lot of time planning out our sexual encounters. We spend a lot of time doing our sexual encounters. We join websites and things like that to facilitate. It's like you're describing somebody who has a healthy, kinky lifestyle and trying to say that just because of the focus that they have on it, they are hypersexual, and that's a problem.
Yeah. Now, you said one very important word there, and that was harm. It's common within us kinksters in our communities to revert. In fact, I even did an episode on hurt versus harm. So as far as the law goes, I know state by state and even jurisdiction within the states, that definition can vary. Is there any work to try to nationalize the laws on what is considered harmful behavior and what is that dipping your toe in a hot tub or a bath that's just a little too hot that sends shivers up your spine, that is not anywhere unlike what we do in BDSM?
Yes. In fact, NCSF has been working for the past couple of years on our American Law Institute project. And the American Law Institute is revising the model penal code on sexual assault. And so we've had a hand in helping to create the definition of consent, which there's a lot of states that don't even have a definition of consent in their sexual assault law, which is crazy. And we've also been talking to them about BDSM. We really would like to move all BDSM behavior, even if it doesn't involve touching the genitals or the breasts, into the category of intimate partner violence, if that happens. It doesn't matter if somebody's being caned or somebody's being fisted. If consent is violated, it's between intimate partners. And right now what's happening is somebody is being caned. For example, we had somebody come to NCSF and say they consented to being caned on their buttocks, but then when it was going too hard and too far, they tried to get away, and the person started caning the back of their calves and their feet, the bottom of their feet, as they tried to crawl away. Well, that to us is clear sign of non-consensual behavior. But that was being prosecuted as physical assault, which is often reserved for, like a barroom brawl or a mugging. And so those prosecutors don't know anything about intimate partner violence and the dynamics that go on. And so what they do is they look at that, and if there's not serious physical injury, which for them tends to be drawing blood or serious bruises, they won't prosecute. They'll just say, well, you consented to one thing. We can't prove that you didn't consent to this. So that's on the one hand a problem. We're not getting things that are clearly non-consensual, somebody saying their safe word. Those aren't being prosecuted if there's no injury. On the other hand, we have cases where people are being prosecuted even though it was consensual behavior or an accidental behavior because there is some sort of injury. And that injury is usually looked at, like drawing blood, bruises, something that's pretty visible. And we had a case that came to NCSF where two people were doing a knife scene. And they weren't even cutting each other. She wasn't trying to cut her bottom, but he moved and she accidentally cut him. So she took him to the hospital. He got stitches. She let them know. And because she was the one holding the knife, she got arrested for assault, even though he was there saying, no, this was a consensual scene. It was completely an accident. It was my fault. They arrested her and they charged her with assault, and she got probation. She had to plead down to a different, a more minor offense. So it's a mess that what we're dealing with, which is why we're hoping that if we put BDSM under the category of sexual assault, if we have this good definition of consent in there, perhaps even more dialogue about BDSM, which is, you need to have informed consent. It's not just, hey, I like to do BDSM, so do I. And then you just start doing stuff. You have to actually talk about what you're going to do. And that's what we call opt-in negotiating. You have to decide what you're going to do, not just what your hard limits are. And you have to have a way to stop it at any time. And we're hoping under the new model penal code, injury won't just be bruising or a slight cut. It'll have to be serious physical injury. And that's defined by law as something much more serious, so that if somebody does have an accident, they won't end up in jail.
So as part of that, how do you see some of the older legislators and lawmakers as a stumbling block? I mean, we are in the Me Too era, and consent can be revoked at any moment for any activity, but yet the laws, as they always seem to do, fall behind, 10 to 20 years. So is this going to be something that we can vote into place by electing different legislators, or are they so founded in what they want to do and what has always been done that it's just going to continue to be a problem until organizations such as the NCSF are able to infiltrate these and make the massive amounts of changes that need to be made?
Well, what we're going to do is they're going to introduce the new model penal code on sexual assault a year from now in spring 2020. And we are going to try to work with rape crisis centers in each state and universities, because they have a real need for education about consent, and liaison with these other groups that really see the need for a definition of consent in a sexual assault law. And we're going to lobby the legislators. We're going to go and explain why this is so important, why the judicial system is letting people down when it comes to, those who try to report rape or sexual assault. And I envision that it's going to be difficult. For example, in North Carolina, the sexual assault law still allows for, they consider sex like a roller coaster. Once you get on, there is no withdrawing consent in the middle. And it's a huge problem. I mean, that just doesn't even pay attention to the way that reality, which is sometimes people want to stop in the middle. They're having an issue and they need to stop. And so I think it's going to be an uphill battle in some states, but that's going to be a big push for NCSF. We'll probably devote a lot of our funds to doing that, to helping people, to train people how to lobby, to, create those networks so that the people who are in that state can actually make a change in the way that we are treated.
I know I've got a friend that works for, well, I'm not going to say exactly what she does, but she works in Alabama, and which is currently the same state trying to overturn Roe versus Wade. But according to her, and I haven't checked this out myself, but in the state of Alabama, a man, or let me rephrase that, anyone with a penis cannot claim to be a victim of a sexual assault.
Oh, I don't know if that's true or not, but that certainly is thinking, and it's very mistaken. I mean, in NCSF's consent violation survey, we found 1 in 5 of the consent violations that happened against male identifying people. I mean, and think about that. Think about all the male submissives out there. And there's actually not even a culture within the BDSM communities to encourage male submissives to speak out about abuse or consent violations. So it could be that statistic is even higher. It's just because even our general society just does not want to hear about violations happening against male identifying people, that it's such a stigma for them to speak out about it. Yeah. And I think that's horrible. We need to support people. That's why NCSF tries to stay very non-gendered in the way that we talk about this, and to point out that, women commit consent violations as well as men. And it's not a gendered thing. We really need to talk about it in a more general way so that everybody realizes they can speak out if they need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I highly commend the work that you've done in the NCSF. I've met several people from there at different conventions, Leather Leadership Conference down in Atlanta. You had a few amazing representatives there. Of course, out at DomCon,
yes.
Which I can't remember any of their names. I'm terrible with names, but amazing people. And every time I talk to them, I learn something new because they're always so up to date on things. Well, talking about the law, there was a recent law passed that supposedly had one intention, and it's had completely other actual effects. And of course, SESTA, FOSTA, or FOSTA, SESTA, I keep hearing people say it both ways. Can you speak on that a little bit? What is it? And if your organization is doing anything to help smooth that out and make it right?
Yes. So FOSTA SESTA is usually that's the way it's labeled in the legal papers. It's called the Allow States and Victims to Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act. So Fight Online Sex Trafficking, FOSTA. And NCSF has participated in filing an amicus brief. We worked with a lot of our partner allied organizations to support the lawsuit that's trying to overturn FOSTA right now. This is a problem because it targets online communication. So take FetLife, for example. FetLife used to have escort groups, and they got rid of them after FOSTA was passed, because if somebody went in there, say an undercover cop went into one of these escort groups, arranged to meet an escort, and it so happens that that escort offered that undercover officer sex for sale, or that undercover officer could just say that escort offered them sex for sale, they could arrest that escort, and then they could go after FetLife because the ad was posted on FetLife. So this has had a huge impact on sexual conversations on the internet, because it really is specifically targeting where people can actually talk to each other, not just a blog where somebody's putting something up and people read it, but they're interacting with each other. So we had numerous incidences. We put the word out. We want to hear how this is affecting you. And it's affecting the BDSM, the polyamory communities, the swing communities quite disproportionately. We weren't even quite expecting this, but it's things like, to such extreme that host hotels are canceling events. Last year, we had a religious political extremist group send emails to the host hotel of a Kink event in Texas that had gone on for years at that same hotel. These religious extremists claimed that the event was encouraging sex trafficking. That word was so scary to the hotel that they canceled the contract for the event. They didn't want to go through the negative, social media campaigns. We've had 7 events in the past few years be attacked this way. This had not happened for over a decade. We had really beaten back this whole idea of trying to shut down our events, and now it's back in full force. There's also issues with payment processing. For example, Eventbrite changed its terms of service to exclude events that promote explicit sexual activity. That's pretty much all BDSM events. We used to always use Eventbrite because they release kind of a portion of the funds before the event. So you can use that to help produce your event. A lot of these other ticketing agencies don't. So now we have ML Ticketing is one of our coalition partners for NCSF because they work with kink and swing and poly groups.
Wow.
Things like all kinds of websites got shut down. I mean, we have this list of sites that are affected that is crazy, like Craigslist Personals got shut down. Pounce got shut down. Swing Lifestyle doesn't allow people to message each other anymore. Collar Space doesn't allow journal entries. FetLife doesn't allow prodoms to advertise. And then there's a ton of sex workers sites where the sex workers used to go and advertise because they could vet people, but those have all been completely shut down. City Vibe, Reddit closed their sub work groups. Night Shift, My Scarlet Book, there's just, dozens of these that have been shut down because of this. And we're also seeing a problem like on social media. Patreon has started shutting down people. There was like a rope how-to with no video, no nudity. It was just, here's how you tie a rope in a kind of an artistic way, completely shut down. Facebook ads. We have sex therapists come to us and tell us that they've been running ads on Facebook for many years and now no longer they can. Their YouTube videos are being taken down. So there's just kind of a blanket social media censorship on sex in general because of this law, because these social media websites are worried that if people start commenting back and forth in the comments, or even just could be accused of promoting sex trafficking by these religious extremist groups, they'll have problems with it.
Yeah, just yesterday, my Facebook page and ability to log into Facebook Messenger under my Cauldron account disappeared 3 times.
Wow.
And finally, as of this morning, it is still there. They brought it back. I guess they pulled it down and reviewed it and then put it up and, wash, rinse, repeat. And it's something that I'm very concerned with about my Patreon page for the show. There's a lot of things that we do with that money besides just pay for media hosting. One of those things is I'm about to become a sponsor of the NCSF or however you declare it there. But I want to make sure that I'm donating to probably, for me, one of the most important things that I can donate that money to. Taking the show on tour, like going to DomCon, where we did 22 interviews, got to interview Mr. Cyan, and a lot of other Master Phoenix, a lot of other, very important people in our scene that have a lot to say on this particular topic as well. So I know as another effect, I've seen where it used to always be arrest the John. There seems to be a huge push now, or let the John go and arrest just the sex worker, whether it's actual sex or not. That seems to be completely changed now, where they're just putting cuffs on anybody and everybody.
Right. No, they definitely are really trying to crack down on sex work. And I worry about the sex workers that are doing, all the sex workers are impacted. We've heard about people being pushed out onto the street, people dying because they've been pushed out on the street. The sex workers suddenly not having the income that they had before, or the safety that they had before, and being able to advertise online, or even being able to talk to other sex workers. It's extremely serious. They're trying to wipe out the sex work industry. They're also, I worry about, like people who do cam shows, who are not even actually in contact with the person that they're doing this with. People are having their bank accounts closed down if it's found out that they're involved in sex work. So really, when it comes down to it, people should have control over their own bodies and their own decisions. And there is a societal interest in making sure that disease is not spread and things like that. But that's the same arguments that are used to close down our sex clubs. There are ways to bring testing to your sex club. Work with the health department. Test people where they're comfortable and use people who they're comfortable with, and people will get tested a lot more. Make sure condoms are available and freely available, like to sex workers as well as sex clubs. There's things that you could do. When we did a survey of sex clubs, they found out that there was far less sexually transmitted diseases within a sex club than there is in the general population, because they were so well educated about this. So the same thing could happen among sex workers, because they have a vested interest in being educated about this and in ensuring that their customers all use condoms. It could be that if you have regulations, health code regulations around this, that you could end up having a population of sex workers who are even more healthy than the general population and are helping to spread the word about consent and spread the word about protection to make sure people aren't spreading sexually transmitted diseases.
Yeah. Now, I grew up in the church, in the Southern Baptist Association, and it seemed like at least once a month we were having a big meeting about sign this virginity contract or chastity contract, things of this nature. And I thought that by the time I was in my 40s, these people that I grew up with who were into politics and have since been elected, that this would change, but it's getting worse.
Yes, we have. We actually saw it in our incident reporting and response program. NCSF does direct services. People come to us for help because they need an attorney or they need resources in their legal battle, either child custody, or they've been fired from their job, or they've been outed and they're trying to figure out how to deal with that. And we also help groups. Well, we saw an uptick in August of 2016, where our groups were starting to be attacked more, individuals were being attacked more. At that point, it was, I think in 2016, we had 124 requests for help. Last year, we had almost 300. The problem is that when you have a socially conservative administration in, like we do right now, and especially it's exacerbated by this us versus them way of speaking. Those people are the danger. We're the good people. that sets up things to be adversarial. And so we've seen a lot more discrimination, and we hear from our allies who are doing LGBT issues that they're also seeing a lot more discrimination among people just because of this idea that there is an us versus them, that we have to clamp down on people in order to protect ourselves. And of course, the trans discrimination has just skyrocketed. Mm-hmm. So whatever your politics are, you have to, if you're in the alt sex communities, look at that and balance. Well, what will happen? Will my event go away that I love to go to? If I vote for this president, it really does have a direct relationship.
So I know that a lot will depend on the next elections, especially the presidential election, as you just said. How likely is it that this can be overturned, say, within the next 5 years?
Well, I think that, having watched this for so long, I've been an activist since 1991. There are definite cycles that swing more conservative and then it swings more liberal. And the last real liberal swing under Obama, 8 years, we had the birth of FetLife. We had gay marriage passed, gays in the military. So what's going to happen is once we have a more liberal administration that's pushing things in a more progressive way, we'll have a swing back where we'll be able to gain more traction again. And hopefully we'll not have to be doing such a defensive posture and trying to just protect people from having their rights infringed. So I do think that these swings do come. It's just a matter of where are we going next? Are we headed in a more conservative, socially conservative direction where people are going to try to tell each other what to do in your private life? And that's really what it comes down to. We don't want that to be happening. We want, as long as we're not harming each other, as long as it's consenting adults, we should be let alone to do what it is that we want to do.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the big issues that I've done adult film work. I have been a professional dom, and sure, as adult film work, I would consider that sex work. Now, my work as a professional dom was in no way would I ever consider that sex work. And there seems to be a big pull both ways to terminology and things of this nature. For me, it was non-sexual. For some of my clients, yes, it was sexual, even though there was no touching of any genitalia or anything like that. But from being spanked, some people will orgasm, as is well known within our community and thoroughly not understood outside of our community. But is there any push to better define what a sex worker is and help that apply to reconditioning, reformatting, or doing away with this law?
I haven't heard anything like that because what's happening is it almost seems like people are banding together more, that pro-doms are more willing to identify as sex workers because they are being attacked as sex workers. You know what I mean? So I just see the sex workers across all different kinds of fields, including adult entertainment. The Free Speech Coalition is the advocacy group for the adult entertainment industry, just like NCSF is for the BDSM and poly communities. So they are under siege. They are absolutely under siege. And, we had thought, again, under the Obama years, things really loosened up. Obscenity just really wasn't prosecuted like it had been in the past. Although I do want to point out that the obscenity that was prosecuted was usually BDSM porn. So we still had not quite gotten to where we needed to get. So they're kind of hanging on, and what they've done is they've linked their adult entertainment has linked their chariot to big business, because of cable. Mm-hmm. They're streaming these videos and they're making a lot of money doing it. So in some ways, they went the kind of corporate route to really try to ensure that they would not be shut down, and it's worked. So I just see that sex workers of all different types, and whether you identify as that or not, it's just really exploded. And the internet has really helped that, where if you've got a certain niche desire that maybe you would never meet somebody in your life who also likes that, popping balloons that are filled with chocolate pudding is your big thing. You can go on the internet and you can find a whole community of people who are into that. Beautiful thing, because we really need that peer support We really want to, that stigma and shame is the worst thing for people's lives. So anybody who feels embarrassed about what they do or what they want, don't. Because there is a lot of people out there that like it too. It's just a matter of trying to find them to connect with them, which is why we hate this law so much, because it specifically targets our communication with each other about sexual content. And, as adults, we should be allowed to talk to other adults about what we like sexually without having the government intrude on that.
Yeah, I've always been in favor of getting the government out of my life.
Yes. NCSF did participate in, we actually did Lobby Day last June in DC, and we trained people how to lobby. So we sent a few people there to participate, and that was really interesting because the legislators had not heard that there was a problem with FOSTA. And so that's why lobbying is so important. You want real people right in front of them saying, this is a problem for me. And we're hoping that they will listen. It's just swung so conservative that it's very difficult to get a lawmaker to kind of step out on a limb and say, oh, well, we have to also think about the people who want to talk about their intimate personal lives.
So with anybody that's listening that would like to get involved and become a lobbyist, does it require a law degree or any special education or training? Or is this just something where, I'm going to go to Washington with this group of people and try to talk to lawmakers and make some changes?
It can just be anybody. You really just want to be a constituent of the lawmaker. You want to be talking to the person who represents you. And it's actually better if you're not a lawyer or somebody who's, a professional lobbyist. If you're there just as their constituent and saying, listen, this is important to me, they are supposed to listen to you. So whether it's going to Washington to lobby federally, or like we're going to be doing next year with the model penal code on sexual assault, we'll be lobbying our state legislators. It's a very easy and fun thing to do. We give a training, which takes about an hour. Sometimes we'll do it a few weeks ahead of time. We work up our talking points so everybody's kind of on the same page, so you don't have to come up with it your own. And we like to encourage people to think of a personal story that can tell, that impacts on this. So you're talking about something that that's important to you and connects with this issue with them. That's all it takes. And it's usually just a little nugget of information talking for about 3 minutes, and then you're out of there. But it's very empowering to realize that we do have control over our own lawmakers. We put them into power, and we can take them out of power. And we can go and talk to them and tell them, if you don't do this, we're going to work to get you out of power.
That actually sounds like a very simple process.
It is. It's wonderful. I've lobbied federally and at the state level, and both are very empowering and a wonderful thing to do. You don't need anything special. In fact, you can actually choose to just go to be visible. You don't even have to speak. You can just be the backup, because if you show up with 8 people and 2 of them speak, that's great. It shows that we're backing you. So even if you don't feel comfortable actually talking to your legislator, you can show up and be there in support of the people who are.
How would someone get involved with the NCSF to do this?
Well, we're going to do a big lobbying push next year. We're going to call for volunteers. If you want to volunteer now, we have a volunteer form on our website. It's ncsfreedom.org, and it's under Get Involved on our website. And you can let us know what you want to be involved in. You can tell, hey, I want to lobby when there's a time to lobby. Or you can say, hey, I want to help with, whatever your skill set is. And we try to pull our volunteers from that. We are an all-volunteer organization. We don't have paid staff at NCSF. So you can also donate to NCSF, and every penny you give is going to go to our projects and programs, because we're a 501c3, which is a foundation, so you can get a tax-deductible charitable donation on your taxes. And we are a membership group, so you can also join as a member. You can join as a coalition partner if you're a group or business, a supporting member, and get listed on our website, or an individual member. So, we have a tiny budget, and we just have a large group of dedicated volunteers that have made extraordinary changes over time.
And one of the other things that I definitely want to mention about the website is the Kink Aware Professionals.
Yes, the Kink Aware Professionals, which you are on. That is our most visited page on our website. That is professionals who sign up on our list And it's attorneys, it's therapists, it's counselors, it's life coaches, it's website designers, massage therapists, tax attorneys, so that, if you are a sex worker, you can, sometimes you want to go to an attorney who's more understanding about kink and non-monogamy. And that's what these professionals all have said. They are understanding of kink and non-monogamy. They are supportive of us. And they're putting themselves out there because this is, you can Google somebody's name and it'll come up that they're on Kink Aware Professionals. So these are professionals that are out and proud and ready to help you if you need it.
And there's 3 different levels of that too, to help you decide as far as how deep you want to go.
Right. You can be kink aware. You can be kink supportive, kink informed, and polyamory as well. You can be informed about non-monogamy. And we're always doing stuff to help our professionals. For example, we're working right now with the APA Task Force on Non-Monogamy to create a brochure for mental health professionals about how to help serve their clients if they're non-monogamous. So, from things like, don't assume monogamy, have more chairs so that in case, invite other partners in so that you're talking to the whole group rather than just, a segment of the group. And there's a whole, it says chock full brochure. So we try to educate our professionals as much as possible and recruit more for our kink aware professionals.
Yeah, I think one of the most disturbing things that I ever saw while working in a psych hospital, and I did that for 9 years in just a behavioral health facility, was the way that the few trans clients or patients that we had there were treated. Nobody knew, and forgive the phrasing, but nobody knew what to do with them. And so this education that is offered by you and others to help people understand, these professionals to understand more of non-monogamy, more of BDSM, and I'm sure that there's educational resources for the trans community as well. It's just phenomenal work that you do and that the entire organization does. So thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. We all feel very dedicated to, not having this discrimination continue. And we've been really happy to see the change that's happened in society, that now people can be so much more open. Now so many more people understand what BDSM is and non-monogamy and can explore this in their own lives.
Mm-hmm. So my listeners got aggravated at me when I interviewed Stephen Ng, who is a sex therapist for the past, I believe, 30 years, because I didn't ask him what it was that made him get into being a sex therapist. So if I may, what exactly was it when talking about a lot of these different kinks in the BDSM lifestyle? You made reference to we and us and ours. So obviously you appear to be a practitioner as well.
Absolutely. I am proud kinky person and non-monogamous. I've been married. I've been with my husband 25 years, and we were non-monogamous before we got together, and have been ever since. And as well as kinky. In fact, we met because he saw me on a television show advertising the 1994 leather celebration, and he tracked me down and made friends with all my friends. But I had gotten into this in 1991 because I was trying to publish my first book. And I met with the publisher. I went to dinner with him and we were discussing it. And he said, well, I just heard that you're dating Jeff and Chris, who was the couple that I was in a kinky relationship with. And he said, if you're dating them, you can date me. And I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. And I thought this was about my book. And he said, no, I would have taken you out to lunch if this was about your book. And I was just like, well, that distinction was lost on me. So I got up in the middle of the dinner and left. And at that moment, I just was like, that's it. I'm going to be out. I'm going to use my real name. I'm not going to ever be in a position to be surprised like that or have somebody use my kink against me and my non-monogamy against me. And I became an activist. I started working with the Leather Pride Committee to raise money for the Heritage of Pride Parade and the LGBTQ Center, because we had to raise money for them so that they would let us hold our educational workshops there. We had to raise money for the Pride Parade so we could march in the Pride Parade. And it was kind of the first instance I had of what we had to do to earn our place, to fight back the stigma. And I've been doing that ever since.
That's one of the things as I go out into just the world itself, the vanilla community, the kinky community, that stigma, even within our own community, seems to unfortunately reign true that, okay, if a man is into this, then he's just getting laid left and right, and well, he's just the man. And if a woman is into this, then she'll be into anybody, and she is shamed.
Yes. I was totally shamed into being an activist. It's the short answer for your question.
and I love that you definitely got some lemons thrown your way, and you're like, okay, yeah, I'm going to make you the tastiest lemonade. And here it is. Nearly 20 years later?
Well, actually, that was 1991, so I'm coming up on 30 years here now.
Yeah, nearly 30 years later, and you're head of the NCSF and responsible for so many changes within this country and so many more changes that are to come. That's amazing.
That question is so funny.
So, Susan, is there anything else that you would like to put out there that you want people to know or to understand?
Well, definitely go to the NCSF website. We have brochures on consent for kink and non-monogamy. If anybody is wondering, kind of what's the standards of consent and to help get guidance for your own relationship, these really lay it out. How to negotiate, points to consider, kink versus abuse, things like that. And that's under our materials. Order our materials. And on the right-hand side, we have the brochure themselves. And we have a ton of other information about consent under our Consent Counts program. So definitely check that out, all the resources.
Excellent. Well, Susan, it has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. And again, that website is ncsfreedom.org. Of course, I will put links to everything that we've talked about in the show notes. Again, much, much respect to you and what you do in the organization itself. So thank you again.
And thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
If you like what we've been doing here at The Crypt and you want to help support us, in the show notes are links to both the Patreon and the PayPal. If you want to make a one-time or a continuing donation, just like show producers do. Our pro producer, Lily Chaos, executive producer, Jeremiah, Arcane DGR and Violet Aurelia, Feline Rouge, Baby Love 2269, and Faisal. Senior producers, Matt, Emerald Wolf, JK, Sort Out the Kinks, Delilah, Sir Mutual Respect, and Master Gabriel. Producers, Kane Sin, That Place, Oklahoma City, which is a dungeon in Oklahoma. Thank you, Mater. Roxy Bear, Olive Eyes, Zine, and Alexandria. Junior producers, K2SO, Buffalo Dom 84, Leisumi, Haley, and Morgan. Also, a big thank you to BDSMcontracts.org for their donation of these beautiful 25-page soft and hardbound MS and DS contracts. Use coupon code Cauldron20, that's KULDRIN20 for no spaces, for 20% discount off all purchases at BDSMcontracts.org. Daycollars.com is a place for personalized handmade collars, leashes, cuffs, and belts. Be sure to check them out. And finally, Whipping Stripes, my personal maker of all things leather and paracord impact toys. None of these three companies sponsor the show. I promote them because they're people that I know, like, and trust. All of the contact information is in the show notes, so swipe left, right, up, or down, or visit cauldronscrypt.com/221, and it'll take you straight to them. This has been Master Cauldron and Susan Wright for cauldronscrypt.com and the NCSF Unearth the Truth.